All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And good morning. It is President's Day, a holiday for many. We consider these national holidays as potential days we might take off. We like to, particularly in the early going, we're still in the first 6 months. I like to keep the momentum. I like to keep the drive alive. So I am here. Kim is here. Oh, by the way, Albert is not here. He's, I believe, on some personal business today. But Tony is here.
Hi, Tony.
Yeah. What angered you, Tony?
Well, Tony, what angered you?
Yeah.
Do we have enough time for that list?
Oh, Tony. Tony lives in frustration.
Thanks, Tony.
But it's so cool to have him in the mix. So Tony will be handling a lot of the audio, a lot of the visuals today.
We had some volume issues earlier.
Today is a great day.
Now you sound really low, so I don't know what's going on. High, low, something.
Tony, is that better? Do I sound better now? What is that? Tony?
Yeah.
Does that
He's
sound
working on
better?
it. He's fiddling with knobs over there.
Yeah.
Every day it's something new.
It's always something.
Every day it's like a technical problem.
Internet does internet
Yeah,
things.
they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Exactly. Casey gets it. They do it to me. I mean, literally every day. Can I not get on the air and just be able to focus on the show and the content? I have to deal with.
No.
Why does this not happen? We're on for a half hour, Tony. We're dealing with this before. Why can we not get this straight ahead of time?
I know, and now you're fuzzy and sounding weird.
What's the problem now? Well, how do I sound, Tony? It sounds bizarre.
It's a little bit of just a bit of freezing on your end. So let's see if it just comes back. It was holding up this whole time. Before show was holding up fine. So.
So let me tell you, you interrupt me at any time.
Yeah.
I'm speaking only to help you determine what's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to tell everybody what I did. I got a faster internet connection, the fastest you can get. And they installed it this weekend. Mm-hmm. And Tony then came up to make sure that everything was.
And it was.
And now something is weird. The whole idea of this new internet connection and this new higher speed was that we would eliminate any issues.
Yeah.
So that the stepped nature of the video or that the pixelation problems, they'd be eliminated or reduced. So
I think your connection is faster than your computer now.
No, the computer's good.
What is the problem, Tom? So it's
I don't
choppy.
know. I'm figuring
Calvin
out.
is giving me the read. Thank you, Calvin. I have only one person here who's giving me the straight scoop.
Yeah.
Choppy, but still understandable.
Yeah. Your voice sounds fine. So
Maybe. Okay.
I feel good about where you are, though. You're safe and sound, unlike the president.
You'll tell me if you want to do something, and I'll address Kim's concerns about the president.
You're not in the line of fire, which I appreciate.
The president made an unscheduled, an unannounced visit to Ukraine. He was to go to Europe, but now he stopped in Kyiv, the formerly called Kiev or Kiev for many years. Now it's Kyiv, which is the way it should be said, I suppose. And he's there and has had meetings with and photo ops with, and those are important because everything at this point is symbolic, at least from a visual standpoint, with Zelensky. And he's pledged more aid. And we're already in, I want to say where are we at? About 60, maybe more? 60 billion?
I have to look it up. It's
you
a
can
lot.
check it.
Google it.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is that a year into the war, this is an important look on the part of the president. I will come back to this in a moment, but can I please tell everybody what's coming up on the show, because it's a really significant show, and I feel bad that that you can't maybe see me clearly or whatever. The pic is freezing. Okay, well, thank you very much for Ron Brown, who has who's filled me in. Between everybody on our show, I am getting a sense of what's actually going on. Anyway, let me tell you what's happening, and you can sit back, luxuriate in the sounds. Although we do have supporting visuals today for a lot of our stuff, the second hour, it's Mark's Murder Mystery Monday. Normally it runs at 10:35. Courtney will be here with Steve Gregory. Steve Gregory has a podcast about murder mysteries.
Oh.
Unsolved crimes. In fact, the podcast is called Unsolved. And Steve will join Courtney with this serial killer's mystery. And one of the things that was remarkable about this is that this serial killer was driven to his crimes, to the locations, and picked up at those locations and driven home by his father. That's right. His dad drove him to kill people and then picked him up and drove him home.
Wow.
So, right, bizarre on top of bizarre. They will detail that for you. Normally we do it at 10:35. We'll do it at 11. Now, the reason we're doing it at 11 is because we have a special guest at 10:35. And I've been wanting to get him for the last couple of weeks. We're so excited to have Dr. Peter Chin Hong join.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chin Hong, if you don't know, is one of the leading infectious disease experts in the world.
Yeah.
He will discuss, of course, COVID. We'll check off on that. But I also want to discuss this growing concern and anxiety around a pandemic, the next pandemic, which may be here.
Mm.
You've heard the bird flu talked about, and you don't even need to look beyond the price of eggs to know the effects of the bird flu. I mean, millions and tens of millions of these animals have been killed because of the fear of infection. I want to say it's more than tens of millions, right? Worldwide, it's well in excess of that. So
Google it.
And then there is a new pandemic virus that's growing, perhaps. And then on top of that, there's a super deadly, think Ebola strain of flu that is being identified in Africa. And I want to ask, so that's just, these are sort of this is the jetliner view. We'll get into specifics with Dr. Peter Chin Hong, but I want to ask him about the realities of us facing another pandemic and the effects on our culture and society when he joins us at 10:35, and what we might be able to do as a society to prevent it from being as bad as COVID or worse. You know, COVID incredibly contagious, but on a percentage basis, not deadly. Although it was, don't get me wrong, nothing to mess with. Hey, my father's still in the hospital from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is that the growing concern around pandemics, particularly those that are emerging out of Africa, are associated with, those anxieties are associated with something that could have a greater lethality to it, you know, with a greater chance to kill you than COVID had. So we'll get all into that with Peter Chin Hong. So on this President's Day, we are working.
You're getting all serious about, death and disease. And all I'm thinking about is how Dr. Peter Chin Hong is my doctor crush.
He's an attractive guy.
He is.
I don't mind saying it. He's no Ryan Seacrest, but he's very attractive.
Yeah.
By the way, Ryan Seacrest choked up. I saw the video. I was going to share it with you. I decided not to. He had that Mark Consuelos come on with Kelly.
Sure.
You know, they're kind of like the baton, and he does that thing Ryan does where he says, oh, you're like family. You become my best friend. You know, when I came here, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to last. And it turned out that, my true best friend has become Kelly, and my second best friend is you.
Oh, God.
My third best friend is it was like it was a best friends convention. And then he says, and you have and Ryan was quite eloquent and lovely. It's just at some point, it's like, I got it, guy. You're leaving, going back to LA to, live in a $40 million estate and have a hot and cold running models bring you cocktails. Okay, I get it. But then he did hand the baton, rhetorically to Consuelos. And then Consuelos goes into his thing, which is, Ryan, when you first came to town, we didn't know that you're this chair has such legacy with it, and you sat on it, and you became part of our family, and more than part of our family. You became our best friend. In fact, bester than our best friend. My God, it's like my blood is your blood, Ryan. I don't know what and Ryan choked up. It's like, okay, got it, guys. Really. Anyway, that's that. But next to Ryan and Mark Consuelos, I'd say Peter Chin Hong is the he's your hunk. And he seems very cool. He likes reggae, and we used to bring him on with reggae over at KGO.
Yeah.
And he has a background. We can talk to him, about this if there's time, but he has a background as a kid in a part of the world that really dealt with a lot of infectious disease. He said that's really what interested him initially. So anyway, that's that. If you're just joining us, my picture is a little pixelated. And the reason for that is still mysterious.
It's all right.
We paid for the highest levels of internet. And then I don't know. I don't know what I would blame the producer. But
whoever is producing this thing has no idea what
I can really blame him.
Blame the news girl. It's fine.
Yeah. Anyway.
Bring it on.
Fill-in guy's always fun to blame too. So fill-in guy.
So we think, Tony, I don't know.
Thanks, Tony.
But Tony was here yesterday, and I don't know why. I mean, if anything was to be identified,
Thanks, Tony.
you'd think Tony would have done it. I don't know why.
Oh, Tony, what angered you?
What angered you to the point that you wanted to sabotage the show, Tony? You may want
Thanks, Tony.
We're the only ones who.
It's my plan all along.
We're when we talk about family, Tony is that to us. I don't think he would ever do it. Anyway, that's what's happening. I want to mention something that's happening in the chat, and I also wanted to double back. There were a couple of things that happened over the weekend with comments. I'll get to those next hour. But yesterday, I was on KFI in Los Angeles, and I did have this interview with Chuck Negron. Thank you, Chris, for hearing it. Chuck's one of the founding members of Three Dog Night.
Oh.
And Chuck will be on this show. In fact, we hope that we're considering doing a couple of things with the Chuck Negron interview coming up. Not today. It's going to be later in the week or maybe early next week when you're here. And that is to keep him even longer and have added content. So for the live show, we'll do a bunch, and then we'll drop even additional content with Chuck, because I just think it's a real window on a part of music and an evolution of music during the late 60s and 70s that's fascinating. And the culture was just so different then. So that's all coming. So that taste of Chuck Negron on KFI, you'll get that taste here as well in the days to come. So now, smash the like button like a boss. I mean, it's the least you can do.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's the least you can do because we're swimming upstream against technical challenges, I guess. But I want to get back to Kim's question or Kim's point. Mm-hmm. Kim is concerned that, smoking Joe Biden is not going to be safe there in Kyiv. That was your concern, was it not?
Yeah. My first reaction when I read that our president, put himself in a war zone was that I don't like that. I'm not comfortable with him being in the line of fire. And I think you made the point. Well, he'll be very well protected. I doubt anything will happen to him. But still, I was reading that this is the first time that a sitting U.S. president has put himself in an active war zone where the territory is not, controlled by the United States. So I think that's taking a risk, taking a chance.
We control the airspace pretty much. So from that standpoint, I don't think you need to worry about that. It's possible that I suppose a missile could land in Kyiv and take him out or, harm the president. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting it's a safe place. But by the same token, I just feel as though the real risk to him is low. I mean, based on the statistics, you're probably in a more dangerous location if you walk into a Walmart in Texas.
Right.
I mean, it's a really safe space they keep the president of the United States in.
Yeah.
But, and if you were to harm the president of the United States, I mean, it would be game on. It would be awful. It would be, likely Armageddon. And we're flirting with Armageddon now. This proxy war in Ukraine, make no mistake about it, is extremely dangerous from the standpoint of escalation. The one thing that's happened is, to this point, it's been a conventional conflict, right? It's been a buildup of immense numbers of people who fight for the Russians. They have the Ukrainians way outmanned, but it's also been a poorly trained combat force on the part of Russia. The Ukrainians, as I say, don't have nearly the manpower, people power, but they have training. They have a real military. The Russians, with their conscriptions, some are being turned around in a matter of weeks and being sent to the front. So on the one hand, I mean, that's an endless supply of people, and I think the Ukrainians are concerned with that. I mean, in a war of attrition, Russia has much, much deeper stores of people and personnel they can put on the front line. But strategically, and from the standpoint of skill, it would appear the Ukrainians have really surprised everyone. Didn't you think when this whole thing started that it might be a walkover on the part of the Russians? That was the conventional thinking.
Who knew that we would be coming upon a year and Ukraine would be holding fast? As a matter of fact, the quote from President Biden today is that he said, when Putin launched this invasion nearly 1 year ago, he thought Ukraine was weak and the West divided. He thought he could outlast us, but he was dead wrong.
Yeah. Now, let me I hadn't planned to talk about this, but this is interesting, and I think it's worthy, and it is breaking news of the moment, which is the Biden visit to Kyiv and to Ukraine and all the ways that Kim has just mentioned, symbolic and real. Let me just mention how things are playing in Russia, because I think we lose sight of that. We get these statistics about all of their troop losses, and we get all of these statistics about the war and how it's going, and it has been surprising how many times at key moments in these various conflicts around Ukraine, Russian troops have been repelled or have been repelled after they had taken some territory. In Russia, it's not being played that way. No. In Russia, the media, which is controlled by the Russians, you remember that last free television station? Remember the one they went out with this blast of anti-war rhetoric? Do you recall? Remember, literally, they were on the air, and their anchors and reporters, they got up in the middle of a newscast. You can find it on YouTube. Yeah. And they literally left. I mean, they had to flee. Yeah. So that outlet and outlets like it that actually tell the war the way it is, those aren't on the air anymore. The people are getting a much more dry, clean version of what's happening in Russia. And so they're talking about Russian dominance, and they talk about the fact that the West is the aggressor, and we're trying to repel the West. This is becoming, in the world now of Putin's crackdown, the dominant narrative. Here you go. Museums and theaters, which remained islands of artistic freedom during previous crackdowns, have seen that special status associated with those freedoms evaporate. Their anti-war performers and artists expunged, which is a ding word. New exhibits put on by the state have titles like NATOism, like Nazism, it's spelled. A play on Nazism is that NATOism that seeks to cast the Western military alliance as posing a threat as existential as the Nazis of World War II. Many of the activist groups and rights organizations that have sprung up in the first 30 years of the post-Soviet Russia era have met an abrupt end. Nationalist groups that were fringe, this is the point, they have taken center stage. So as this anniversary of the Russian invasion into Ukraine approaches, even though the Russian military has suffered all those setbacks, in Russia, the people are getting the mother's milk of propaganda.
Yeah.
And the longer the war lasts, said one business tycoon, the more Russian society is cleansing itself from liberalism and the Western poison. Okay, so I mean, I'm saying the words are pretty intense, right? And again, the war itself, I think wars are only good for one thing: taking territory. You know, you can't bomb people into believing your economic system is best. You can't bomb people into believing your God is best. Military endeavors are to take territory. And so the Russians have been effective in taking territory, but the Ukrainians have been effective in repelling them and taking back that territory. So at the end of all of this bloodshed and all these war crimes that clearly it would seem are demonstrably evident on the side of Russia, and maybe there are war crimes on the other side. I don't know. Those the ones we hear about, and this is our machine, our media machine, are associated with Russia. At the end of it all, there's going to have to be some kind of brokered peace. This war will end one way or the other. It might involve NATO. If NATO actually got involved in a direct way, it's clearly a proxy war now. We could end up in some serious trouble. That's what I was saying. We're looking at, we're flirting at real Armageddon. Mm. These are nuclear powers associated with this entire conflict, even though it's been a conventional war to this point. So, in any case, that's the state of the war. Kim does not like the fact that smoking Joe Biden is there, but he wanted to send a message of American commitment. So he did.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let me just take a look at the chat. Was there anything I need to pay attention to? I guess not. Okay. I mean, it's a quick glance. I don't know. I don't see anything. It's tough, but Kim, you'll watch the chat because
there's some comments on the Ukraine-Russia discussion. Well, I don't know if you've wrapped that up already.
Yeah, Mark, a lot of younger citizens of Russia do not believe for a minute that the BS coming out of the state media or Putin is true. Karen D says, that's probably more true than ever because of social media and the internet. That's one of the good things about the internet, as it destroys our children's self-esteem, as social media, cores out our kids' sense of self. The good thing about it, though, is that information is making it around. Why don't they get propaganda, Maud?
When don't they? Yeah. When don't they get propaganda? Yeah.
When don't they? I can't quite see it.
Yeah.
When don't they get propaganda? Yeah. Well, there were more sources of information in Russia prior to this entire conflict than there are now. I mean, Putin has crushed all sorts of activism and even a free speech. I mean, it's been a brutal period for any independent journalist. They fled Russia. Most are gone.
Yeah.
So how many years can this war possibly go? The first year has been devastating, says Flo. It's true. I mean, it's a good question. And that's why I was talking about a war of attrition. At some point, the Ukrainians, they run out of people. And you understand, this is a defensive war the Ukrainians are fighting. This war is not one involving any kind of offense on the part of the Ukrainians. Their articulated strategy was to drop back and try to take out the aggressors after they moved in. And it's worked. And now with a second huge offensive promised, I mean, it's sort of been talked about on the 1-year anniversary, they'll likely have to implement that same strategy. They just don't, they're not going to invade Russia, right? So the idea is to repel them this way. Somebody mentioned Vietnam. I mean, it's Vietnam in a way. I mean, it is Vietnam in a way. I'm pausing because I'm thinking Vietnam went on for so long. Vietnam was unwinnable. Vietnam was fighting a local population that was not going to give up under any circumstances. It was a proxy war, which, so in that sense, it's true. It was the same in that regard. Communist regime supported by other communist regimes. It was an utter awful. I mean, all war is just so brutal. You had no imperative at all to get involved in Vietnam. That was just Here, the Russians, and this is and then I'll wrap up on this. This is the spin, and you'll hear a lot of this, and you'll see a lot of this on YouTube channels and various talking heads. The Russians saw the post-war NATO expansion as encircling them slowly, and that the West was becoming dominant, and Putin's witnessing of that expansion was something that he articulated as something that he wanted to stop. And he claimed he was threatened by this NATO expansion and by Ukraine flirting with the West. And it is true that Ukraine and Ukrainians enjoyed the freedoms of the West seemed to be enjoying, and they were certainly sidling up to the West more than they were to Russia. In fact, they repelled, you'll remember, that was the Velvet Revolution. They repelled the elected president, the one that had ties to Putin. And the election, they argued, the people argued in protest form, and they flooded the streets. There are some great documentaries on this, and I wish I could remember their names, the names of the docs on this, but they're all over the place. They argue that it wasn't a fair election. Okay, that may sound kind of familiar to you, but in any case, that degree of passion and emotion on the part of the people repelled that president. And then they brought in a president who they held another election, and that president was not one with ties to the Russians. So you end up with this situation that has clearly reflected Ukrainian leans toward the West. And that's concerned Putin, and finally he'd had enough, and then he began this war, which is just a bad idea. It's a bad idea for him. It's an awful idea for the Ukrainians, and I don't know how it ends up. And if anybody tells you they know, they're smoking it, because there is no way to, I think, to figure it out at this point. But can we table comments and questions till later? I've got to get Dr. Peter Chin Hong on. I've got Kim's News coming up. A couple of high-profile losses over the weekend as well. And Jimmy Carter, as you know, is going into hospice. So we'll get into all of that stuff. But coming up, the growing threat of another pandemic, and this one potentially more deadly. We'll get into the next. Smash the like button like a ball. I need something,
Smash
baby.
it with your iron rod.
Throw me a bone today. It's a rough one with the video feed. I got to get Tony to look at it. I don't know what the issue is, Tony, but I am likely going to have to blame you at the end of it. I'm just warning.
Thanks, Tony.
All right. So
That's fine.
All right. Kim's News next. Mark Thompson Show.
Major announcement. Here's mine. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888 Tax Deal. And as Mark mentioned, President Biden is now departing Kyiv after making a surprise visit to Ukraine today ahead of the first year mark of Russia's invasion. Speaking alongside President Volodymyr Zelensky, President Biden said was there to express America's unwavering support and announce an additional $500 million in funding. The victims of the mass shooting at Michigan State University will have their funeral costs covered by the school. That is the situation at Michigan State University, where officials say they will use money donated to the Spartan Fund in the wake of the tragedy. This comes after 3 students were killed and 5 more injured after a gunman opened fire on campus last week. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says he will be making a decision on a potential presidential 2024 run after his state's legislative session ends in May. DeSantis says he'll be focusing on Florida's legislative session starting in March. Only 2 Republicans have officially entered the race thus far, former President Donald Trump and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Following in the footsteps of Twitter, Snapchat, and Telegram, Meta is the next social media company to test out a subscription service. That's right. It would be a monthly subscription service launching in Australia and New Zealand this week called Meta Verified. It would let users identify their accounts using a government ID to get a blue badge. The bundle for Facebook and Instagram retails for $11.99 on the internet, $14.99 on iOS and Android. In San Francisco's racially motivated attack aboard a Muni bus. This happened, caught on video. Michelle Young filming the incident, which shows a man in a striped hoodie yelling anti-Chinese slurs at her and another woman. When a fellow passenger tried to get him to stop, the man started throwing eggs at him. He also threw eggs out the window at random people on the streets of San Francisco. Muni SFMTA saying they are investigating. Young says she's filing a report with both SFMTA and the San Francisco Police Department. If you didn't hear this one over the weekend, actor and comedian Richard Belzer has died. Here's a picture of him. Yeah, he was 78 when he passed away a couple days ago. That according to his friend and fellow comedian Lorraine Newman. Belzer, best known for his role, of course, as Detective John Munch on the police drama Law & Order. He started playing that role in 1993. He reprised it for 23 years across all the different incarnations of the show. He was a Connecticut native, started his career as a comedian in the 70s, joined the initial run of Saturday Night Live in 1975. He was also on the National Lampoon Radio Hour and worked with alongside comedians like John Belushi, Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Gilda Radner, etc. So Richard Belzer passing away at the age of 78 years old. If you consume the popular drink, the Starbucks Vanilla Bean Frappuccino here in the packaged version is being recalled.
Of, pandemics. That's as close, and that's the retail pandemic of Starbucks Frappuccino.
Is that what's happening? Yeah. More than 300,000 Starbucks vanilla Frappuccino drinks are being recalled. The FDA says it's because glass was found in some of these bottles. So the recall affects bottles with an expiration date of March 8th, March 29th, June 4th, and June 10th. And this last story is just because I want to end happy and show you a picture of puppies. Super cute puppies. It's National Pet Day today, February 20th. Holiday focuses, is it a holiday? I don't know. Focuses on giving your pet plenty of attention. So people are encouraged to pamper their pets and do their best to honor that special relationship. And puppies are cute. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. For more than 30 years, Steve has put his tax knowledge to work for individuals and for businesses. So if you need help with your taxes, call Steve Moskowitz. He's at 888-TAX-DEAL and MoskowitzLLP.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
Right on.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson. The Mark Thompson Show.
Joe Fish, Sal the Shoemaker, Joe Box, and Little Anthony.
Their envy wonton killing. I don't know what a wonton killing is. I'm going to have to look that one up.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
And I want to welcome you back in the show today. We have, it's a magnificent show. Not the least of the reasons is coming up right now. But am I still a little pixelated? And I think I'm a little, right, Tony and Kim? So if you're watching on YouTube, my picture is because of some screw up on Tony's part. We don't know exactly what it is, but there seems to be an issue.
That's self-flagellate right there.
We are blaming him. But he is researching ways, but you can hear everything fine. And this guy, fortunately, his signal is is clean. He's one of the leading infectious disease authorities in the world. We love having him right in the Bay Area, and he's a terrific spokesperson for getting out medical information and the real story amidst the anxieties that create falsehoods around these pandemics and infectious diseases. Please welcome from UCSF, Dr. Peter Chin-Ha. Hello, doctor.
Hello, Mark. Hello, Kim.
It is so cool to have you in the mix. I have so many questions to ask you because I, for 3 years, have just focused on COVID. Has it been that long? Doctor, it's been 3, is it 3 years? Something on that. It feels like.
It feels like yesterday when we were just dancing in the streets in 2019. But yeah, it's been 3 years, and I feel like Rip Van Winkle have waking up, I guess. And I'm going to Trader Joe's, and the lines are like really huge right now.
It is wild how we've sort of gotten back to normal. The reality is, I feel as though you were one of the people who was saying eventually COVID will get to be this sort of low simmer that we're aware of, but it won't force society on its side the way it did for the first year.
Exactly. Pandemics do end. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. It doesn't mean that some people are not getting still very ill. And we still have about 20 patients at UCSF, but nothing like 150 1 year ago. So, things are spiraling downwards, but it's important for people to continue to protect themselves, particularly if you're more vulnerable.
And the reason that the numbers have dropped, is it because of a herd immunity? Is it because of vaccination thresholds? What's the reason?
I think the herd immunity, well, not really herd immunity, but people's immunity in the population is getting better and better. And the better it gets, the harder it is for that virus to ping pong from one person to the next. So, you've seen media reports of lots of scary variants and things like that with COVID, but it doesn't matter how scary the variant looks, because the soil in which the variant is landing is becoming more and more inhospitable. But that same variant, if it goes, in China, it's estimated now to have probably killed 1 million people or so. Even though that's kind of under the wraps, but it's because it's a very different population from ours right now.
I want to ask you about these other emerging pandemics, potential pandemics, okay? Emerging viruses. We've seen what the bird flu has done, the avian flu, and it's forced the extermination of all of these poor animals. I don't know what the numbers are. I was saying before, it could be hundreds of millions. There's so many, it's worldwide. But I also have seen it now reportedly having moved into the mammalian population. So it has made that jump from the birds into mammals. How concerned should we be about this?
I think in the immediate period, we're not too concerned, but in the medium term, I wouldn't even say long term, it is a continued threat. Most people thought that the next pandemic we had before COVID was going to be avian flu. If you look at the history of pandemics in the world, we've had 5 pandemic flu caused by flu, 5 pandemics caused by flu in the last 100 years, and all of them have been caused by avian flu. So this new one that we're seeing is just a matter of time before it gets into the human population. In fact, it already has. It's just not as efficiently transmitted from human to human yet. But at some point, it's going to get a mutation pretty soon to allow that to happen.
So just to put a point on it, a mountain lion, a bear, and a skunk are some of the latest victims of this bird flu virus spreading around the world. And now it's being considered. The WHO is talking about this, and then there's another outbreak. I'll get to that in a second, totally different virus. They're considering vaccinations in some places. So they're testing avian vaccines. And I'm wondering if you can give me a state of the state on that, and what is your disposition toward that? Wouldn't there be the same mutations that we saw with COVID?
No, it's very different. So I brought my little puppets here again. So everybody remembers COVID with the spikes. Influenza is not like COVID. It's this is actually one of the, actually, let me give you another. Influenza is a little bit simpler, but it still can cause a lot of
so cute.
Have mutations that can actually get into the human population. So the way it happens is that there are lots of different flu species that affect different or different variants that affect different populations. Like there's a pig influenza, there's a bird influenza, and that's bird flu. There's a human influenza. But what happens is that one type of, like say a pig gets infected with a human influenza, but also can get infected with with a bird influenza. They can kind of mate and exchange these mutations, and then it'll be easier to have a human infected. And that's the kind of problem that we're seeing.
Wow, that's scary. I mean, it's like that's the Frankensteinian thing where there's a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one. Does that make coming up with a vaccine more difficult?
So with the vaccine, I think there is a H5N1 vaccine that was piloted. It's being stockpiled right now by the United States and some other countries. But the problem is, like you alluded to, Mark, if this virus mutates more, that vaccine would probably not be as good. I mean, it's good for what we know so far, but not probably good for the mutation. So if it does happen, unfortunately, I think we'll see some lockdowns again while people have enough time to build the next generation of vaccines. It probably won't be the same amount of time because we have mRNA technology now. So in the old days, it might take 5 to 7 months. I think we might get away in about 2 to 3 months if it does come on board.
That's the H5N1, just to be clear, if people
Yes.
are just joining us. That's what we're talking about. This is the new avian flu strain. The strains of a virus out of Africa, Doctor, are incredibly deadly, with essentially, as I was reading, the same list of symptoms, and sort of the way it offs you is the most awful way. You bleed out. I mean, it's like some kind of a sci-fi novel or something. And the other thing is that prior to you being killed in this awful way by this virus, there aren't any symptoms. It's sort of there's a period of asymptomatic exposure, and then boom, you're done in a matter of, I don't know, you can tell me how quickly, but it can be very quick.
That's scary.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what you're talking about in terms of other kinds of potential outbreaks, although I do think avian flu is probably the one that most people are scared about for the next pandemic. But there are lots of other things circulating around. I think everybody's heard about Ebola, and that's one of the kinds of what we call hemorrhagic viruses, which, like you said, Mark, causes people to just bleed out from all these orifices, like your nose and mouth, and it's the reason why recently we had airport closures to some people coming from Uganda because there was a recent outbreak of Ebola in Uganda while COVID was still going on. So if you think about, the world, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer or to be alarmist, because I'm still, going out and enjoying myself. But, the WHO has declared 7 public health emergencies of international concern since 2007. And they include things that people have heard about, like chikungunya and Zika and COVID and monkeypox or Mpox, Ebola. So I think we're seeing it fast and furious on. What it means is that, there are 2 things. One is, 3 things, I would say. One is globalization. So it's just easy to spread one virus from one country to the next by air transport. If you remember all those movies like with Gwyneth Paltrow and flu and all that stuff, it's the same idea. The second reason, of course, is the fact that we as humans are going into territories because our population is getting bigger and bigger to set up homes, like in the Central Valley with valley fever, for example. So you're building homes into places that humans haven't been before. So you're going to be interacting with these sort of like weird viruses spread by bats and things like that. And the third reason, of course, is that climate change. So climate change is just making it easier for pathogens or vectors like certain types of mosquitoes and things like that to live in places where they wouldn't have normally lived were it not for climate change.
Yeah, this is, you really articulate so well why the danger is there. The reason these things jump to the human population is because of this mammalian host or something, and that, for example, in Guinea or with the Ebola virus, as you just said, or in Uganda, that's what happens.
Yeah, so if you even think about HIV, it was thought to be transmitted to humans from mammals, from monkeys, actually, because humans were going into the forest and getting more and more exposure to wild animals for bushmeat or for exotic meat, and that's how it probably jumped for HIV from the macaques or the rhesus from the monkey primate population to humans. So we're seeing the same theme repeated over and over again with lots of other kinds of things like Ebola. It's similar in that way.
I want to get I'll get to this John Watson question.
Okay.
It's up on screen. Let's just get to it now. If you get it for a second time, COVID, oftentimes you can get sicker. That is sort of counterintuitive. Why is that?
You don't get sicker the second. Some people with COVID, you don't necessarily get sicker the second time you get it. Some people might get different symptoms, or it depends on when you get it too, with COVID in particular. But most people, the second time you get it, it's milder. Some people might get different symptoms. So I think that's really the issue. There's one study in a vet population in St. Louis where they looked at this older veteran population, and they showed that the more times people got COVID in that population, the higher chance of getting long COVID or chronic symptoms, because you're just playing COVID roulette. But for most people, the second time you get COVID, it's getting better and better because your body has seen it before, same old, so it knows what to do. So that's generally for most people.
The thing I was going to ask you relates to something else that's showing up a lot in the chat, and it, I think, was provoked a bit by a remark you made about, if this happened, like let's say the bird flu, the latest H5, okay,
right,
and H5N1 that broke big, or whatever other these looming viruses actually began to spread, and you needed to do things societally. We needed to get back to the dance that we've just done.
Yep.
And I'm seeing so now with that, against that backdrop, I'm seeing the whole list of Americans will never do that again. You could get away with maybe 2 weeks shutdown, maybe not even just 2 days shutdown. I'm not shutting down again. You get, this country, you get it. We've already been through it once, and we've sort of road tested how the whole thing went. My question to you is, how effective are the shutdowns? And because I remember you just mentioned China. China shut down completely, and now they have, it's a house on fire, right? And what do you think the appetite of the American public would be for another? So it's a lot in that question, but if you could take it.
Yeah. So let's think right now first about COVID. So it's not just the idea of shutting down. I think the shutting down actually did a lot of amazing good. When it happened, remember, San Francisco was the first in the world to really declare shelter in place. Then California did it as a state. But in that period of time, when we didn't have any therapies for COVID, we didn't have any vaccines, and the mortality rate was high, particularly in seniors. And that was essential for keeping our population with a lower mortality or death rate. In fact, when you look at California versus many parts in the world, we have some of the lowest per 100,000 death rates, and that's because of that early action. I think people are conflating that shutting down in a period with not necessarily thinking about when you shut down. So in the beginning of a pandemic, when you don't have anything, it's really important. Now, of course, you wouldn't shut down because we have so many tools and vaccines, and we know how to treat people, and we know about how it works. But if you think about avian flu H5N1, you're at least historically talking, because in 1996, it was the first human outbreak for this particular virus, and now it's mutating a little bit more even. You're talking about a 53% mortality rate. That means like 1 in 2 people who get it are going to die.
That's
potentially.
scary.
So
Big
I
time
think
scary.
that will probably motivate people to probably take it slow until we understand a little bit more. So I think it's different from COVID. I think everybody's over that. But with a new threat, when you don't know anything about it, that's going to drive people to behave the same way.
That's a great point. I didn't even think of that. I mean, obviously, if it's a different animal, if you'll pardon the expression, with that kind of mortality rate and potential, people will be a little less excited about going out and about interacting. Kim, did you have a question for Dr. Peter Chin Hong? I didn't mean
I
to
have
dominate.
so many questions for Dr. Peter Chin Hong. I have one realistic question and one completely ridiculous question. The first is, I was reading that after the COVID vaccine came out, that we might not be too far away from a vaccine for the common cold. Have you heard about that? And is that real?
Yes, that's totally real. People are working on it now. It's called a universal coronavirus vaccine because the common cold is caused by about 200 different viruses, and coronaviruses related to COVID are some of that. So I think that working on this universal coronavirus vaccine would help against many types of common colds, probably a large chunk, but probably not all of them, which will be an amazing thing in terms of quality of life. So that's being worked on. Different ways of giving the vaccine are being worked on. There is an inhaled vaccine that's already approved in China to supplement the injectable vaccine. So it just prevents people, we hope, from even getting symptomatic infection apart from keeping you away from the hospital.
Right.
So those are all things that we're seeing happening. There was even a recent study looking in animal population, which may get into humans eventually, of something called Shield, where you kind of essentially it's like almost like a food product, and you like coat the nose and the airways by a spray with something that looks like gelatin, and it just kind of keeps the virus from getting in the front door. So these are all, I think we have a lot of technology now. We understand viruses better, and we're more agile, but some of these are things that we'll be able to see in the future. At the end of the day, I think nobody's excited about getting a bunch of needles. If you can combine a lot of stuff in one needle, a two for example, a flu, COVID, or universal coronavirus vaccine,
Right.
people will be psyched about it.
So
I'd like. It's been a couple hours since I've had a vaccine, so I welcome a new one. Yeah, but that is. I do think that the delivery systems changing could be truly transformational. Go ahead, Kim. What was your ridiculous question?
My ridiculous question is, a lot of people are watching this show called The Last of Us, and it. Have you seen it?
Yes, I love it.
So at the very beginning of the show, this infectious disease expert, who's no Dr. Peter Chin Hong, but yet there he is anyway, talks about if the temperature goes down as global warming happens, that their fungal infections will be more likely. And indeed, that's what happens 20 years after he gives this interview. Is there any possible way that if our body temperature changes, or if things environmentally change, that we could be looking at some weird thing like that?
I mean, it's more science fiction-y than reality right now. But, I think, for example, in fungus, there's this, even in our backyard in the Central Valley, in Fresno, Modesto, all these areas, there's this thing people probably know about called valley fever or coccidioidomycosis. It's kind of like one of these bugs in infectious disease where when it's cold, it's kind of like a mold, but when it's hot, it becomes a yeast. So cold is mold and heat is yeast. So as you change the temperature, this organism goes like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde into different forms, and different forms can have different ways of spreading. So say in the cocci thing, when it's cold, it grows up into a mold, and that can sporulate and like spread all over the place. And when it's in the body temperature, it can become infectious. So it's not totally out of the realm, but I'm not sure it will kill people like in The Last of Us.
We're not
Or
going to
make them
turn into
zombies.
no mushroom-headed zombies. That's
I
not,
know.
no.
Although that bug, that fungus in The Last of Us is actually a real fungus. Doesn't affect humans, but affects insects. And it does make the insects move around to make it easier for the fungus to reproduce. So if you look it up and look up that particular organism, it is kind of like based on reality for insects.
Wow. Man, like we don't have enough to worry about with the other viruses that we were talking about, and then there are even more on top of that you've alluded to. I don't know. Certainly, just to review as we say farewell, I'm so grateful for your time. The H5N1 is probably the front burner concern from the standpoint of infectious disease right now, right?
Yes, it is the front burner. Again, history repeats itself. And even if you think, we always talked about a 1918 flu pandemic that decimated so much of the world as a comparison to COVID, but that was caused by a different kind of avian flu. And the whole idea is the same. The audience knows about it. We humans haven't seen a new thing. The new thing can adapt to infect humans and spread from human to human, which we're seeing in mammals already, like you alluded to. And then in the beginning, we're going to be vulnerable to getting seriously ill.
Super last thing from the chat. Randy asks, can you ask the doctor about recent studies I've seen that indicate that KN95 and N95 were not really effective against COVID? I still wear a KN95 mask inside stores. He wants to know the truth about that, please.
Yeah, the truth is that it's still effective. The studies haven't really, it's hard to do a great study in a population level on masks because if you look at those studies, only about 40% of the people in the intervention arm wore the mask properly. Plus, it's hard to keep that controlled in the population. But when you look at studies in healthcare workers and in schools where you can control things more, those masks have been very effective, as well as laboratory studies.
Wow, there you go. It has been, Debbie says, hi, doc, your knowledge, advice, and encouragement got me through COVID. Wow.
Yeah. I still believe that listening to Dr. Peter Chin Hong is one of the reasons I haven't gotten COVID, and his discussion of COVID being COVID street smart.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at you,
Kevin.
Dr. Peter Chin Hong. A lot of people, a lot of love for Dr. Peter Chin Hong. Normally, I'd be threatened by another man getting that kind of love in my presence. But in your case, I think you deserve it. We really do adore you. All right. Normally, I bring you in and let you go with reggae music, but because now our YouTube platform, we get copyright strikes if we use music without, licensing. So you'll just have to imagine some reggae music playing in your outro. You know how we love you, and the audience does as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Such important information, and we'd love it if you'd visit again.
Thank you so much. One love.
Dr. Peter Chin Hong. Yeah, right on. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Put some questions to the side for next time. He's the best, the real thing. I'm going to take a break. We'll get Kim's news, and then it is Mark's Murder Mystery Monday with special guest Steve Gregory from KFI Radio and from his own podcast, which is a terrific true crime podcast as well. Kim, you'll hear all about it from Courtney. She's a big fan of Steve, and so it was really a get to have him join us. So this is really cool. So all of that's still to come. Smash the like button like a boss with your iron rod. Smash it with your iron rod for Dr. Peter Chin Hong and for Steve Gregory and for the whole crew that's shown up here today. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888 Tax Deal. President Biden's secretive trip to the capital of war-torn Ukraine was logistically complicated and difficult. The White House says the historic visit was meticulously planned for months. It involved a small number of officials from the National Security Council, the Pentagon, the Secret Service, the White House Military Office, President Biden spent about 5 hours in the country meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials to pledge U.S. support amid nearly 1 year now of that Russian invasion into Ukraine. The United States is also committing support to Turkey as that country recovers from an earthquake that devastated the country earlier this month. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pledging to support to help rebuild areas devastated by the earthquake during a trip to Turkey. The United States allocating at least $185 million to Turkey and Syria in humanitarian aid. The United Airlines apparently becoming a little bit more family friendly, you could say. It looks like the company says it is opening more seats to families traveling with kids under the age of 12. This comes as Congress considers a ban on airline family seating fees where you have to pay if you want to sit together. Scientists believe a data tracking necklace can help smokers kick the habit. Researchers at Northwestern Medicine in Illinois say the SmokeMon device can tell how long a person placed a cigarette in their mouth, and it's worn around the neck with sensors measuring thermal activity. The researchers plan to refine the design of the SmokeMon so it looks more like a piece of jewelry, something else to help you stop smoking. Tonight's Powerball drawing shooting up again. It's now up to $87 million. No grand prize winner on Saturday. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz. For more than 30 years, Steve has put his tax dollars to work for individuals and for businesses. If you need help with your taxes, Steve Moskowitz is the one to call. He's at 888-TAX-DEAL and MoskowitzLLP.com. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson. The Mark Thompson Show.
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Everything is going extremely well. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
I apologize to every creature and pastor.
What he's got going here is a situation. We have processes and protocols and standards.
No.
60% of the time, it works every time.
What up, party people? It is Monday, President's Day. We are here with a live show. That's right. Yes, we are closing in on 10,000 subscriptions, which I appreciate immensely. Those of you who have reached out, those of you who have shared the show on different platforms, Facebook, or, you kids with the Facebook and the Twitter and all that stuff. Thank you for that. Not yet. We're going to expand, and at 10,000, we can do even more things. So we're very close to that. I appreciate that. Meantime, smash the like button like a boss and give us a thumbs up. And of course, you can support this show with super stickers, super chats, as well as the Patreon and PayPal models, which have really, people ask, what lets you on the show keep the most to pay everybody and, you hang on to the most, if you will, what platforms take the least from whatever our donation is? The answer is Patreon and PayPal. So if you want to go the extra distance, just go to themarkthompsonshow.com. And at themarkthompsonshow.com, you can click on Patreon or PayPal, and you can make a donation that way. Well, look, I appreciate we're crowdfunded, so sadly, I have to hit you for donations. The great thing about Mondays is the murder mysteries, everyone. This is Mark's Murder Mystery Monday.
Welcome to Mark's Murder Mystery Monday.
Yeah, and she's here with a guest, Courtney, everyone. Wow, that was loud. Welcome, Courtney. Hi. So, Courtney, you have with you a special guest today. You were quite excited to get this guy.
Guest.
Yeah.
Yes, I am a huge fan, huge fan. And just saw that he was doing a podcast and thought it would be incredible to have him on the show.
He does a true crime podcast.
Yeah.
Tony, can you hear Courtney okay, or what seems to be the problem? Are you all right? Before I bring Steve on?
Yeah.
Tony?
She sounds fine. She sounds okay.
Okay, fine. Okay. You had that
So far,
look on
it
your
sounds
face
okay.
like maybe there was a problem.
What's that? She's a bit low at first, but she sounded okay now. She sounds okay.
Okay,
now.
she sounds okay.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay. Now, I'm sorry to interrupt Steve's introduction. Please, so go ahead. Who is he?
Oh, well, we're so lucky. We have Steve Gregory on this morning.
Steve Gregory. Well, that was nothing. Sorry, Steve. I was going to mention Golden Mike winner, true crime expert. He's hip deep in law enforcement with a number of contacts.
He's had dozens of Golden Mike
The
awards.
dude has
Yes.
literally so many Golden Mikes that he could
Associated Press
pave his
Awards,
front
yeah.
walk with
I know.
Golden Mike awards.
Edward Murrow Awards. Yeah. I
He's
know,
the real deal.
extraordinary.
Steve, we love having you here. Thanks for taking a minute.
Good to see you, Marco. Hi, Courtney.
Hi. Thank you for being here. We're
Steve,
so lucky to have you.
Are you on a stakeout right now, Steve?
You know, here's the crazy thing. I almost had to cancel today because we had a big breaking news story. I think you've heard the news about the bishop of the archbishop,
Yes.
the bishop of the archdiocese here in LA murdered. Well, they've announced an arrest. I'm at the Hall of Justice now, downtown Los Angeles, where the sheriff's about to announce the details having to do with that case.
Wow.
That you're right. I mean, and that was a mystery when it first was released, the information yesterday, because they were saying so little about it. I mean, we didn't even, and there was no information around it. So now they are making an arrest. Okay.
Well, the arrest has been made, and the reason they were sort of tight-lipped around it is because they were surveilling the guy and eventually found him down in Torrance, but they were doing surveillance on him, and they have to be very careful with what they let out because they don't want to tip off the suspected shooter, and that person could escape, go to another country, or whatever the case is. So they have to tread very lightly until they're absolutely sure they can get him.
I see. Yeah, makes sense. So what do you have today, Courtney? What are you and Steve featuring?
Well, we wanted to talk about the podcast that Steve is the host and executive producer for.
And what's that called?
It's called Unsolved with Steve Gregory.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I've been a fan of KFI for a very long time, but an even bigger fan of Steve. And I know that Steve has spent most of his career in investigative journalism. So it's great to see that he has this podcast, which I don't want to speak for him, but was created to serve for those cases that are unsolved. And so I can let Steve talk about it a little bit more, but of course, Steve is on KFI as well. So
yeah, KFI is a radio station, a huge radio station in Los Angeles. Go ahead, Steve. Talk about your show, and then we're going to talk about this particular case.
Sure. The show was born from a segment I did on a midday talk show, the Gary and Shannon show. They had me come on to talk about this cold case that I was covering, and the response from the audience was so overwhelming that we were kind of kicking it around. It was kind of a joke that maybe we should do a show about cold cases. And with my plate being so full, I just wasn't that interested in doing it. Well, management really kind of pressured me into it. So they had an opening on Saturday nights. So we did it. Then, of course, we also do the podcast platform part of it. And then it took off. And from then, we developed the show into seasons just to keep track of all the cases. So we're in the middle of our fourth season right now. And we do cases from the LA County Sheriff's Department, LAPD, the Pomona Police Department, San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, Riverside PD, all over Southern California, rather. But one of the cool things that we're doing now is that the radio show is going to stay hyper local, but the podcast will now segue into doing cases around the world. So we're going to be doing cases from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We've got cases coming out of Arizona, and we may even have an unsolved case coming out of Dubai in the very near future.
Wow.
So we're going to be featuring unsolved cases from all over the planet on the podcast platform.
You'll be traveling all over the planet. Does that mean, Steve Gregory?
Well, if I had the kind of budget to do that, I would certainly be traveling all over the planet. But thank God for Zoom, because we'll be doing an awful lot of these remotely.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. I mean, it really is great. The degree to which it's achieved the kind of popularity that allows you to expand its reach. So, Courtney, what is the story today? What are you and Steve talking about today? Because this is a crime, and I know a murder that was featured on Steve's podcast, which is one of the reasons you felt he would be a great guest today.
Yes, yes. Well, there were two stories really. The first was the very first episode of the podcast. I was really compelled by the story, which was the one that you teased, which was a father-son duo where the father was driving the son to commit the crimes, which I thought was very interesting. And then there was the most recent podcast that aired on Saturday, Yelani Uyoa, her unsolved crimes. So maybe we can touch on the Anthony and Manuel Velasquez crime, which happened, I believe the murder started in 2014, right, Steve?
Yeah. So what basically happened is this guy was killing others, and they were trying to figure out what the connection, if any, might have been. Well, come to find out, he had killed 2 men and 1 woman. The woman he had killed apparently had a romantic connection to the other 2 men. Well, then what connected all of them even further were drugs. Well, at least the woman was homeless at the time, and there's surveillance footage of this guy, Velasquez, going in to the tent in East Los Angeles and actually putting a gun inside the tent and opening fire and killing the woman inside the tent. Apparently,
that's not this picture. It's the next picture. The next picture, please, Tony.
Yeah. Oh, next picture.
Next picture
is
again.
the
Sorry.
surveillance.
The surveillance shot, apparently.
So that was the PT Cruiser that was really sort of, it really stuck out because it's an unusual looking car. And what they found out was this guy didn't have a license. And so the father was driving him from murder scene to murder scene. He killed 3 people over 4 years. And he was nestled in this really nondescript house in East Los Angeles. And the benefit of my relationships with the sheriff's department were such that I got a call about the case back when they were still trying to piece it together. So my very first episode of Unsolved literally talks about a case from the beginning to the end. So we actually solved the case, but I wanted to take the listener on that journey from what it was like to get information about the case first, and then push it all the way up to where I was exclusively allowed with the sheriff's department SWAT team to go in on the raid that morning and arrest Velasquez and his father. Now the footage that I prominently, and I know those are stills there, but there's some footage that's prominently displayed on my TikTok. I think is where I have it. Steve Gregory 818 on TikTok. There's footage of me. That picture you see of Velasquez on the left there, you see me walking with him in handcuffs, and I ask him why he killed those people, and his response is pretty classic. So I actually talk with him as he's being led to the car and into the vehicle, and then the announcement of the charges. So we got to take the listener on the journey from the murders that were committed, why they were committed, the person of interest, which became the suspect, the weird twist with the father, and then the conclusion of the case. And now it's obviously sitting in the criminal courts.
Well, what? So Steve's not going to tell us what the guy said to him? I mean, I'll listen to the podcast.
You got to go to TikTok. If you go to TikTok, Steve Gregory 818.
You got to go to TikTok. The one thing I never want to hear on this show is you got to go to TikTok.
That's not fake. That's real.
The reporting is incredible. I mean, you're there with Steve as they are arresting these 2 men. It's extraordinary.
All right.
Yeah.
So Unsolved is the name of the podcast.
Yes,
Unsolved with Steve Gregory.
Unsolved. Yes.
Go ahead. Anyway, so the picture that we're seeing now on YouTube, on the guy on the right is the father who drove the son to various murders because the son didn't have the driver's license.
For one of the crimes in a PT Cruiser, it might be added. Yeah.
But I thought one of the other things that was interesting about this case was that the reason that the apprehension actually happened as quickly as it did, or when it did, was because there was reaching out to the community, wasn't there? They ID'd the car and all that sort of thing.
Yep. And that's a really good point, Mark, because that was really an example that illustrates how community policing works, because they got the description, and Courtney, you had that up there, the sketches of the 2. The pictures of those sketches were put on bulletins and on flyers, and they were hand delivered to all the homes in East LA. Now, keep in mind, they had already suspected who this guy was based on confidential informant information and other sources. What they needed to do was get confirmation. So they handed these flyers out strategically to homes around the area where they knew this guy lived. And so when they did that, they got a flood of phone calls from residents, from neighbors. And the reason they had never come forward before is because this son and father had basically ruled that neighborhood with an iron fist, and they were all afraid of him. And the kid was known to stab people's tires, vandalize vehicles and doors. So they were all very afraid of him. So when they came forward anonymously and told him what had happened, they knew they had their guy. Now, interestingly, the morning of the arrest, because we had to see my call time for roll call was at 3:00 in the morning. And then I drove in a convoy with the SWAT vehicles to the location. Then they had a van there with, wires and bars on the side of the glass. They bring the father in first, and then they bring the son in, and they sit him in that van, and they just sat there. And I asked the investigator, I said, well, what's going on now? Aren't you going to take him anywhere? And he goes, no, we're letting him sit in there and stew. I said, what do you mean let him sit in there and stew? And he goes, that's where we get our best intel. They don't know we're recording, and they're in there talking. And so that's how they got a lot of intel, because those two were sitting in the van talking and complaining back and forth.
This is the stuff that you do have, which is really cool. The sort of the methods and strategies that law enforcement uses. It's fascinating, and that's one of them.
I think there was, or if I remember correctly, there was a woman that you were interviewing in the neighborhood, and she was like, we saw the flyers, we saw the silver PT Cruiser. It's hard not to assume it's them.
Right, exactly.
Like them.
Yeah, the flyers, they were really good. The sketches were excellent.
It's like, at some point, it's your neighbor.
Yeah, and but they never came forward before. They knew these guys were into bad stuff, but no one ever came forward for fear of retaliation.
Yeah, Kim's saying it's strange that the dad drove the son to the murder scenes because the son didn't have a license. That's really the lawyer concerned about braking while you're on your way to a murder?
It's true. It's true.
The other thing that people are saying, just so you know, is that my audience is saying we're never going to TikTok. Oh, we did go to TikTok for everybody.
Oh, there you go.
Everybody's saying we're not going to TikTok, Mark. We're not going to TikTok. Screw that. We're not doing TikTok. Well, here it is. Here's the answer, and this is Steve's moment with the perpetrator. Thank you, Tony, for grabbing this for us. So we'll.
Thanks, Tony. Why'd you kill those people?
Excuse me, sir.
Why'd you kill them?
Up a little bit. See? Watch your head. You could have asked him about those tattoos, what was running through his mind when he got those, Steve. But I get you.
Well, the reaction, that's why I didn't want to give away the reaction, because he never said anything to me. He rolled his eyes and just gave a real sarcastic smirk to me. And it's funny because detectives, when they saw that video, because that video aired on every television station that night, because I was the only one that was there. So all the TV stations reached out to me for that footage, and I gave them permission. But the detectives were laughing because they said, no one had ever really asked anyone that point blank, but the response of him rolling his eyes and turning his face like that, like, really, like, you're going to ask me that right here? The detectives thought that was hilarious.
What was there any kind of relationship between this guy and his victims or not?
Well, the only relationship was between the woman. We were told that he had a romantic relationship with the woman at one time, and then we were told loosely that the relationship with the other guys had something to do with drug dealing, and there were drugs involved. It was apparent or suggested to me that Anthony Velasquez was dealing drugs and that the guys were buying from him. So there was some sort of a weird sort of triangle there between the three people.
Wow, that's wild. Yeah, I wouldn't make fun of his body ink, while but I just feel as though it was strange. Somebody in the chat was saying, be careful, of making fun. But for those listening, he had Los Angeles on his back, and on his front, I don't know what it said, but it was also very prominent. He really committed to body art, which is, I got to give him that.
Yeah.
But
part of the police sketch and part of what they put out to the public in the search of these two suspects was the neck tattoo that he had.
Oh, wow.
As a distinguishing characteristic. Yeah.
So actually, in the end, look, between the PT Cruiser and a prominent neck tattoo, I mean, the guy is pretty much,
you're not hiding out.
Yeah, there
that,
it is. Possible driver.
If you go down one, Tony, I think you should maybe go. That's his father dropping him off. That's his father in the PT Cruiser. If you go down one more, I think you'll see the victims. So these are the three victims. Mm-hmm. Well, I can't thank you enough, Steve, for coming
so that's
on.
Nick, the victims' names. I was just going to read their names. But, but now they're gone. Nikki Lopez, Eduardo Robles, and Jesse Avalos. Yeah. God, that's just brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
It's just awful. I'm grateful that you came on. It was so nice to chat with you. And there is a new story as of Saturday. So I've been listening to it. It's extraordinary reporting. When I spoke with you, you were going down to speak with the detectives, right? Or the investigators?
You're talking about Yaneli Iota, the 15-year-old girl found stuffed into the BMW trunk. And she... Yeah, this was a heartbreaking story because at 15 years old, she had a 14-month-old son. I'm sorry, daughter. She had a 14-month-old daughter, and she was 15. So she had a child at 14. And so she had a really tough childhood. And she was in 2005, in the summer of 2005, her body sat in that trunk, laid in that trunk for almost 5 days in brutal heat before someone finally realized there was a stench coming from the trunk. And when they got a locksmith there to open it, they found her body inside that had been horribly decomposed. And when they start backtracking the clues on the case, they find out she'd been dating someone that was older, and that person and his family escaped to Mexico pretty much that day, and they were unable to track him down. So to this day, they're looking for the brother of the suspected killer. And I interviewed also her brother, Ray Iota, and had a really nice chat with him about their relationship together and who he thinks actually killed her. So that was this past weekend's edition.
Yes. Tony, if you go to the next slide, this was her boyfriend at the time, correct? Jose Gonzalez? Granados, yeah. And he, it was his car. It was his stepfather's car that his stepfather had given to him. And that is how they found him, correct?
Right. So they believe, actually, they believe Jose Granados is dead. They had heard rumor that he was probably killed by a cartel in Mexico. So they're looking for his brother, Francisco Granados, because he was actually what they characterized as sort of the straight-laced member of the family. He was in college. He was about to go into the military. He was responsible, and they're hoping he's going to be able to shed light on it. They just need some closure and comfort for the family at this point.
Boy,
wow.
So it's a lot of sadness wrapped into a lot of these stories, but you do want some sliver of justice, which is pretty much all you can hope for,
Yep.
But pal, so appreciate you coming through. You're just such
Mark.
a great journalist, and you have such a great connect with law enforcement and so many of the things that are going on in Southern California and beyond, as we learned. So let's talk again. Please come visit anytime. Steve Gregory.
My pleasure.
Again, it's Unsolved with Steve Gregory, the podcast. Subscribe.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony. Bye, guys.
Yeah. All right.
Mark's Murder Mystery Monday on the Mark Thompson Show. The Mark Thompson Show.
It is smash the like button for Steve Gregory.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it for Courtney.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Hit that like button. Smash it for Tony.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Tony. We're going to have a conversation after the show about this pixelation. I don't know what
I have an idea what's up. So we might need to call your internet company. They might be capping your upload speed, is what I'm thinking.
Oh,
That's what I'm thinking. It's my one guess right now with what I'm seeing. So because I know the computer's running fine. So
I'm paying maximum, Kim.
I know.
For this.
How are you?
And
we'll figure it out.
It's really pushed me to the limits emotionally. I don't really know if I have.
I'm not gonna cry.
Yeah, it really is close to cry territory. The tears of resignation. You know what I mean? Of
You just
defeat.
need to don't be such a perfectionist. And
Now,
then
I
then
need a
it'll all
clean.
be all right.
Somebody said in the chat, which is pretty funny. Steve Gregory's signal from his car is better than Mark's.
It's true.
Why is that, Tony? God,
don't
all
know.
right, hang on.
I don't know.
All right, I got Kim's news coming up, but I also have some strong breaking stories.
Oh.
Yeah, and you're going to like them. One of them has to do with the Super Bowl. One of them has to do with Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
And I have a word about Jimmy Carter, who I know has gone into hospice, and my word is related to how the image of Jimmy Carter has changed through the years. So I will get into that. Do I have time for it now? I could do it now, I suppose.
Yeah,
but
why not? Go
all
ahead.
right, so we'll do it now.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All I was going to say, and I'll just try to keep it short, is that, Jimmy Carter is widely regarded as a guy with sort of a purity of heart. He was associated post-administration with this Habitat for Humanity, building houses, and he really, as an author, as something of a political philosopher, having written and opined on any number of things through the decades since he was president, he's achieved an elder statesman status, and lost in all of that is the fact that he was not a popular president. He lost in a landslide, I'll remind you. His presidency was marked by double-digit inflation and an Iranian hostage crisis that was one of the things that propelled him out of office. That is to say, even during the inauguration of Ronald Reagan, there was the Iranian hostage crisis double boxed, I think, because you'll have to check this. But I believe that literally the hostages were, on the tarmac in a plane, as I recall, on his, as the inauguration was happening, the flight was taking off type thing. You can, again, check
Google it.
But my point is simply that at that time, Jimmy Carter he wasn't hated because he wasn't a hateful guy, but the American public was frustrated with where America was, both economically and, as I suggest, diplomatically with this hostage situation. And so he was expelled from office, is the word I will use, because he lost in such a big landslide. Now, cut to now, or 20 years or even 30 years, you begin to realize how someone's history and profile is recharacterized and reconstituted. And that's what's happened with Jimmy Carter. And so he's a beloved figure in American politics now. And he, as I say, certainly through his actions, has a purity of heart and spirit. He's a deeply religious guy. And I think that religion has seen him through a lot of the adversity that he's faced as a senior, But he didn't have that status when he left the Oval Office. I would say that if you had asked people in the first decade after he left office whether or not Jimmy Carter's presidency was a failed presidency, I think they would say yes. And it wasn't for lack of smarts. He was an insanely smart guy. But, presidents are also victims of world events and an administration that made some moves that really didn't staunch the bleeding of inflation, which was really the thing economically, I think, that marked his administration. Did you want to say something, Kim? Sorry.
Yeah, we talk a lot about Jimmy Carter and his commitment to helping, build homes for a Habitat for Humanity and the good things he's done. And I came across something I wasn't aware of, and it's this story. Apparently, he helped wipe out a parasite. He was very interested in taking care of this parasite and managed to wipe out the guinea worm disease. He'd been working to annihilate it since 1986. And because of his efforts, it's basically non-existent right now. So I thought that was kind of an interesting
So,
side note.
and what were his efforts specifically? I didn't know. Was he just brought visibility to it, or he helped raise money to fight it, or what was the way in which he?
Apparently, he had a nonprofit organization. He led this international campaign to annihilate that worm disease in people.
Wow.
Looks like it's a skin disease, and it's in poor communities where the water isn't safe to drink.
Sure.
There was no drug or treatment to prevent it, but because of the Carter Center, the efforts that they have made and to eradicate the disease, apparently it's plummeted to an all-time low now.
Wow. Oh, I
Mhm.
didn't know that.
Kim, how are you?
That was very
Gui-
good. I'm
Guinea
impressed.
worm disease dropping by more than 99.99%.
That's a lot of percent.
That's not
Yeah.
fake.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah, that's a lot of percent.
Yeah.
So we give him a credit for wiping the horrific guinea worm parasite off the face of the earth, according to Kim, in addition to
I
building
didn't know
homes and
that. I mean,
churches.
who knew, right?
Yeah, I
I'm
certainly
sure
did
there were
not know.
people that did know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all I'll say in wrapping up, certainly when you talk about Jimmy Carter, is this is an extraordinary individual. He is an elder statesman, able to opine, I think, sensibly and smartly on any number of things, as he has. I mentioned he's written a couple of books. You may not always agree with him. And again, I think he came off a failed presidency and watched his profile politically change through the decades. But he's certainly very well respected today. And it's sad news that he's going into hospice. So there is that. Smash that like
it
button.
with your iron rod.
When we come back again, I've Super Bowl news, Chick-fil-A news, and some law and disorder next as we continue.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by tax attorney Steve Moskowitz at 888 Tax Deal. Let's talk about this one more time. The United States sending Ukraine $500 million in new military aid. President Biden making the announcement during a surprise 5-hour visit to Ukraine. That happened today. And another powerful earthquake rocked Turkey today. This one was a magnitude 6.4, hit in the same region devastated by a massive earthquake, or more than one, that killed tens of thousands of people. There were no immediate reports of more casualties today. And speaking of Jimmy Carter, which Mark was just talking about, moments ago, there's a church now in Jimmy Carter's hometown asking for prayers for the former president because it was announced over the weekend that the 98-year-old Carter will spend his remaining time at home with his family under hospice care. He attended and taught at Marantha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia. And of course, as we know, another friend of the show, Spencer Christian, is very good friends with the Carter family. So I wanted to show that picture as well. Marjorie Taylor Greene, oh yes, she says a national divorce is needed on President's Day. In a tweet, Greene argued Republican and Democratic states need to be separated and the federal government needs to shrink. She accused Democrats of pushing traitorous America Last policies. She wants a divorce from Democrats. There's a man in custody in San Jose. Apparently, the second attack on a street vendor in San Jose, the latest happened over the weekend. The victim claims he was attacked with a baseball bat Saturday morning by an employee of a nearby auto parts business. And again, it's the second attack on a food vendor in San Jose since last Thursday. And it is, unfortunately, case closed for the People's Court. That's right. The Hollywood Reporter says the longtime small claims courtroom series with Judge Marilyn Millian, did I get that right, Millian, will end its run after the current season. It is the longest running traditional court show with 39 seasons. So gavel out for the People's Court.
Yeah,
That's it.
That's let the bailiff show you out. My God.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear you.
And she was inspired by the People's Court, but Judge Judy was never the People's Court. She was more successful in the People's Court, right?
Well, wasn't the People's Court the first judge was Judge Wapner, right?
Yeah, Judge Wapner,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah,
He
and now
made
it was Judge Marilyn Millian. Did I get her name right? Millian. Yeah.
I mean,
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
that's right. But Judge Judy is my favorite. But yeah,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
right. It was Wapner and then a bunch of others.
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
the end of an era. The People's Court. Good kiss it goodbye. This report sponsored by, speaking of lawyers, tax attorney Steve Moskowitz.
Kiss it goodbye.
This report sponsored by Steve Moskowitz. He is the best. If you have a tax problem, whether you're an individual, whether you're a business, whatever your situation, Steve is the one to call. He's the one that we trust here on the Mark Thompson program. You can call him at 888-TAX-DEAL. You can also check him out online at moskowitzllp.com. I'm Kim McAllister on the Mark Thompson Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself. The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
Thompson, party of 4.
Yes, we are here. We are. It's been suggested, and you'll pardon me for constantly referencing it, but it's been suggested that we change our server or whatever, our internet provider, which we might do, Tony.
Yeah.
I might just pull the plug on the whole internet provider and go to a different one.
Good day, sir.
Exactly. I've had enough. My
cable modems are weird that way, where
speed
they
is
can
not
work
what it
really
should
good
be.
and they can work really bad. It's cable modems are kind of like a shared thing. So if other people in your area are using more, then it kind of degrades you. But if no one's on it, then you get more. It's kind of one of those. That's the weirdness of cable modems.
So we need to go next door.
I still need to change mine here too. So
Pardon me,
talk to
could
the
you please
neighbors, is what you're
stop
saying.
using your computer? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
I think Tony's mic is not selected in his settings. I think I think your camera is picking up your voice. That's what I think. How's that for me diagnosing it? No, it's not. When you're tapping, I'm not hearing it. And
one thing that is coming in.
Speak, I think it's some other mic in the room that's picking up.
Hold on.
Come on, Tony. Let's get
One
it
thing
together.
that's crystal clear is the Mark Thompson pillow behind you.
I'll tell you what is
the
yes.
merch.
Thank you.
That's
it is
fabulous.
a merch fest. Thank you, Kim, for getting me off my
you're welcome.
my tilt that was infecting my brain. There are a couple of great things. The throw pillow in our house is one of our favorite items, and there are others. I think I sent a throw pillow to Steve Moskowitz.
Oh, that's nice.
I hasn't dropped me a note or anything. I mean, saying he got it. I'm not saying he has to, but you know,
this whole time.
Yes, now you sound like yourself. There you go.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah.
Damn
okay.
it.
I don't like to tell you.
I totally know what I'm doing.
You're the
Really,
big expert,
everybody.
and like, oh, you're the rocket scientist, and I'm going. By the way, you may want to. Anyway, getmarkmerch.com is where you find it. The other thing, and it's the hottest new item, is behind me. That is the hoodie.
Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show hoodie is it's tasteful. It's a good pullover hoodie. So there's a solid front to it with a pocket there, to keep your hands warm, and also some place to put your hands and to keep your major announcements. That's where you keep your major announcements. And then we have you can see right behind me above the tote bag is the Mark Thompson Show. I want to call it a fanny pack, but it's also a crossbody
bag.
Yeah.
I'd like to note that sweatshirt is very well made. It's embroidered on the top. It's not like a screen thing. It's it's an nice embroidery, and it's only $50, which usually sweatshirts are $80 to $100 or more.
That's right.
Which is crazy to pay that much for a sweatshirt, but this one's really reasonable. I like it.
Yeah, it really is. It's almost too reasonable. I feel like we could have raised more money by just jacking the price up, but we didn't do that. We kept it affordable.
No.
So yeah, I think it's like $44 or whatever. Whichever. There it is, and it really is cool. Yeah. And I also like the fact that you don't have our logo like screaming at you. It's nice. You can wear it proudly, but you don't have to be a walking billboard like the ones with big. Now, we may come up with stuff like that too, but I'm just saying if you want something that's a little lower profile, this is the perfect item for that. So Um, there you go. This is the bad signal, says Lika. All your neighbors are streaming SAG Awards material because Friday is the voting deadline.
That's pretty
You know what?
funny.
Speaking of the SAG Awards, they were slow in getting me any kind of screeners. It's just ridiculous. I'd pay for a bunch of stuff that I shouldn't have to pay for because you pay with the way it works is your SAG after dues. They cover you, so you're paying all the time for other stuff, right? And as a member, you have to vote, and they send you the links so that you're able to see the material and vote. So they haven't sent me anything, and I'm really, finally what dribbled in is something I already paid for, but it was something that I hadn't watched all the way.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because I found it, I probably started it and I was tired. I mean, this is and I fell asleep and I kind of just found it to be meh. I mean, and here's what it was. And here's what it is, because I watched the entire thing start to finish last night. It's The Fabelmans. And The Fabelmans is the Steven Spielberg directed, much lauded, semi-autobiographical movie that's out right now. He wrote it with Tony Kushner. And I have to say, and Michael Snyder said the same thing. And if you knock around on reviews, and this is the interesting thing about Hollywood, this thing is winning Critics' Choice Awards and Golden Globes. And all that. Yeah, dude, let's cut the crap. I watched that movie. It's good, but there's nothing compelling about that movie. There is absolutely nothing compelling from a story standpoint. And the thing about Steven Spielberg is he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He is deserving of all of the accolades and of being raised up as great as he is. But let's be honest, that's not a great movie. It's just not. Great performances, but the story just doesn't go anywhere. And that is what Michael Snyder said on the show. He kind of went, meh.
Yeah.
You want it to go. You're rooting for it to go. You love the primordial ooze of a story, but it never really takes off.
That's
So
a bummer.
I really did not enjoy it, and I wouldn't recommend that movie. But it'll win, or it'll get nominated for stuff because he's Steven Spielberg, and I understand that. They're awarding nominations and awards for him, not for that movie. So the other thing I would say about it is, I wonder to what extent it's one of those things where the emperor has no clothes. Is that it? The emperor, right, Kim?
Yes, the emperor has no clothes. Yes.
Where people know what I'm saying, but no one wants to say it because they're too mobbed up in the industry. Because how could you say that about Steven Spielberg?
It would be weird, though, to feel like you had to give him an award. It's not like he's made all these great movies and never won anything. He's got a shelf full of awards. So
That's true.
why this and why now?
Really good point. Really good point. John Watson says, saw it this weekend too. Agree with Mark. Good, but not great. But Hollywood loves movies about itself, and movies in general is why it might win. I would say it's not even good. I would say it's miss it. It's not. I'll put maybe I'm being too tough. Good. I don't know what good is. I mean, it's not a bad movie.
Yeah.
It's not gonna. You're not gonna go, wow, this is awful. So you're right. It's good, but it's I told you I saw that Triangle of Sadness. That's a great movie. That movie is terrific. It's the Swedish director who did Force Majeure, which I haven't seen, but it's got that Swedish sensibility in the humor a little bit. But it's a English-speaking movie, but it's an international cast because it takes place on a ship, on a yacht, on a luxury yacht, much of it. And I really recommend that. And there are other great movies. I told you, I thought Tar was really good. So I'm just getting into it. We have other stuff still to see. All Quiet on the Western Front. And on Friday's show, when Michael comes in, we'll talk more about this.
I watched The Woman King last night.
Oh, how is that?
I enjoyed it. I mean, it gets a little preachy at some points, but it's good. It's good. I mean, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, it's the best movie ever, but it was good.
Yeah. This is interesting. I want to watch Triangle of Sadness. It's not on any platform I've got. I thought it's on like 3 different platforms. What platform do you have? It's on Amazon for $6. I think that's what I got.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm laughing because it's so funny. You do feel sometimes like, wow, how many platforms do I need to subscribe to before I can be eligible to see whatever fill in the blank movie it is?
Yeah.
The Super Bowl. I've got news about the Super Bowl. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
The Super Bowl is the biggest thing in television viewing in the United States. Nothing gets more people watching.
Yeah.
And people watch the Super Bowl from around the world. So what's being proposed and talked about is that you will pay to watch the Super Bowl from now on. Instead of the Super Bowl being free and advertiser supported, they're going to say you pay $250 per household to watch the Super Bowl. Yeah,
Stop that.
That's exactly right.
What?
I'm saying
That'll
it's a proposal.
never happen.
Well,
That is
you say
insane.
that.
Isn't it enough
former
that they get
ESPN
$70 million for 60 seconds of a commercial? Isn't that not enough?
Apparently, it's not enough, Kim. They want to make more money. Now you understand the commercial time is the profits from that go to the network typically that's carrying that commercial inventory. That network pays for the rights to broadcast the Super Bowl, so they have to offset those rights. Same thing at KGO when they have the Niners games or they have the Giants games, right? So here's the deal. Former ESPN president, current CEO of Meadowlark Media, his name is John Skipper, thinks the league should make the Super Bowl pay-per-view, $250 a household. Sure, you're saying, not going to watch it, forget it, too expensive, I'll watch the highlights. He's saying, I get it. A lot of people aren't going to pay the money. But if half the viewing audience still buys it, it's still a fortune, he says. He says it's the only way for the NFL to dramatically improve on its $18 billion of its annual revenue. $18 billion, not enough for you, Sparky?
Yeah, not enough. Come on.
This year, Super Bowl 57 between the Eagles and Chiefs drew 182.6 million viewers, an average of 113 million watching at any given time, and 118.7 tuned in for the halftime show with Rihanna. 118.7 million people tuned in for Rihanna's halftime show. So that made the Super Bowl the third most watched television show of all time, biggest game viewership since 2017. And they are saying that if half the people paid $200 to $250 per household, you're going to have big parties, big Super Bowl events, and it will be billions of dollars more into NFL coffers. He's saying that this is the best way I can think of for the NFL to increase their annual revenue take for their clubs. Make the Super Bowl a pay-per-view event.
Everyone's got their hand out and wants more money, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting theory. I mean, they could double their revenue, the NFL, on a pay-per-view event with just half the viewership paying that money.
Speaking of which, you can donate to the Mark Thompson Show at themarkthompsonshow.com.
Thank you for that. Bring it home to something that we care about. Yeah. I mean, it is true, though. You'd almost have to do a party then. You're not going to pay $250 for yourself and your spouse or your partner, your friend or whatever. Even if you had 4 people come over, it's not worth it.
No.
Right? It's just not.
How many times is the Super Bowl not a good game? There's
Yeah,
been
exactly.
not
It's very possible it won't be a good game.
Yeah.
That's right. So,
and then if I'm paying that much to watch it, does that mean no ads, or are they going to still plaster it with ads?
So here's what I would tell you is likely to happen. They would make it a pay-per-view event, and there would be the same configuration of ads as there was before. I believe that would be the way. Look, and why do I say that? Let me tell you why I say that. because Amazon carries Thursday Night Football, and they carry it on a paid platform. You have to pay to watch, and they still have ads as though it's a regular network show. So they're guessing that people's devotion and excitement about the NFL is such that they'll actually pony up the money. Maybe it won't be 250, maybe it won't be 200, but it will be something. So
yes, I think
the
the Sunday
sound
ticket
from my wallet
plan,
is getting really loud. If
Did
you
I get
pay
loud?
200, what's that?
Oh, sorry, I thought my volume was wrong. Sorry.
No.
Thanks, Tony.
You're a little low, but I can't tell anything anymore.
Okay.
You know.
I think so. The Sunday ticket plan, right? Like they're with Dish or
Right.
whoever's going to carry it. That's like $300 for the year, I think.
Yeah.
And they
Sunday
want
ticket,
the one
yeah.
game that much? Come on.
Yeah. Half the people, no way. 1% of the people pay $250. That's right. According to the.
Good day, sir.
That's right. Lee says, no way I'm paying it. Deduct $250 from that projection because you're not going to get that money here.
Good day, sir.
Says Ron. Wants no part of it. Yeah. Does seem like a lot of money, I have to say. The other big news out of the land of the popular is from Chick-fil-A, everybody. That's right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
They're a conservative-owned fast food chain, Chick-fil-A, as you know. They are testing a $7 plant-based sandwich. That's right, cruelty-free. Made from cauliflower. It costs more than the chicken original.
What?
I mean, that's he's pretty much setting up a test to make sure it fails. The 77-year-old fast food chain announcing that they're going to be trialing, as they call it, a Chick-fil-A cauliflower sandwich. They're going to do it in 3 of their locations: Denver, Colorado; Charleston, South Carolina; Greensboro, North Carolina. The new sandwich has deeply divided fast food aficionados, and aficionados is a ding word. Some welcome it. Others say it's a silly sideline from the core offering. Some say, oh, they're going woke. Oh, my God, they're going woke.
Is that what vegetarian means, going woke?
I don't know. The woke thing is just like one of those. I think it's great. Why not just have an option? And,
Right.
you know,
What
so
cities
it's
again,
not.
Mark?
It's not a. What's that?
Said what cities again are they going to test it in? You said
In Denver and in Greensboro and in what was the third one?
Somewhere in the South.
Yeah,
Why
it's
wouldn't they
Charleston,
test it-
South Carolina,
succeed?
Greensboro, North Carolina, and Denver,
Why
Colorado.
wouldn't they test
do
it
it in LA and New York, where they'll buy
Right.
those
Exactly, you're
higher
actually getting money.
population would actually buy the
Crazy.
vegan option.
That's
Crazy.
ridiculous.
The cauliflower is breaded and fried in peanut oil, served with pickles and a toasted bun. But the sandwich isn't considered vegetarian or vegan because it's cooked in oil that's also used to fry chicken sandwiches. Oh,
Well,
so
then
it's
what's the
not
point
really,
of it?
I don't know, fried
What a bunch of
cauliflower.
dummies! If you're gonna
Yeah.
if you're gonna offer a vegetarian thing for people,
Yeah, really do it.
then offer a vegetarian thing for people. Who wants a cauliflower sandwich if you're not a vegetarian?
Yeah,
And now the
exactly.
vegetarians can't order.
Wild idea, but it just might work.
I don't know that it will work because it for the reasons that Kim is saying. I mean, it just doesn't quite hit the mark. I mean, I don't eat any animal products, but I wouldn't touch it because I don't want it the stuff that was made in that, oil with animals.
So I would think that would justify the higher cost because they have to basically have a
separate fryer.
a fryer.
Fryer,
just
yeah, but
for
in this
it,
case, they're not even setting up a
No, they're
separate
not even
fryer.
doing that.
They're
Yeah.
just jacking up the cost.
Yeah, fried your chicken and then you fry your cauliflower. No, that's
The company's
Who's in
founder,
charge?
Truett
Whoever is running
Cathy,
this
deeply
thing.
Christian, insisted the restaurants close on Sundays as they do to this day,
yeah.
But I don't know. People really get their back up about vegans. It seems like the last people and segment of society that people feel comfortable making fun of. I don't understand why. It's like these people they want, torture-free food or whatever they're maybe they're doing it for reasons associated with health or whatever. Who cares? I think it's because there are a couple of situations where you'll see, protesters or whatever, and then you feel like everybody's got his finger wagging, But anyway, this is the breaded cauliflower sandwich. If you're in North, South Carolina, and Denver. You can find it. But as Tony says, why start there? Why not start in a market where you actually could have some success? It's weird. On the NFL Super Bowl being pay-per-view comes this. Okami-san says, I will poop in my hands and clap before paying the NFL that kind of money. Wow.
Good day, sir.
I love it. I will only buy a vegan sandwich if tastier, cheaper, and healthier. Well, it is healthier, but it may not be tastier or cheaper. I don't know. Anyway, that's the story. Hey, I want to recognize a couple of people who supported us today, Tony. Do you have those people ready to go? I really appreciate it. I know it's President's Day. And Stan Pollock, CPA, what up? Big shout out.
Big shout out.
I want to give you another Big Dan Ashley shout out.
Big shout out.
I appreciate your contribution, Stan. You are a person who has contributed before, and I very much appreciate it. We're crowdfunded, so this is how we stay on the air. Wes Theory also, another repeat customer. Big Dan Ashley shout out.
Big shout out.
And thank you for the $5 super sticker today. Walter from the islands. Aloha, baby. I got 5 on the holiday show. What up?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Walter, on the island of Hawaii. And Elwin. Good morning, Kim and Mark.
Thank you very much.
Love it, Elwin. Still the coolest name.
Thank you,
all of you. Really appreciate it. It's how we keep the lights on, actually. I wanted the, Tony, I thought that this would be this upload thing that I, stepped up and paid an extra.
Yeah.
I don't know. I may get you on the line with
Oh
me.
no, we might have to do some testing after the show. I got to see what's going on with your upload speed.
It's pretty brutal.
It's what I'm
pretty
something.
brutal.
I said audio quality's
very
good.
patient.
It's just kind of potatoing the camera. So we need to figure out why that's happening. So
really patient, but I appreciate.
But your connection's been stable.
Yeah, there's that.
It's been connected, so we haven't lost you, which is good.
No, it's true.
Little victories, man.
It's just we will get to the bottom of this, even if we have to change providers, which I would be, which I would happily do. So
basically, I'll have you do a speed test after the show. We'll figure out what's going on with your uploads. So that's I'm guessing that's the problem. So because I know the computer's running clean, so we'll figure it out. If I need to come there, I'll come there and I'll fix everything else if I have to.
Tomorrow, who's on tomorrow? Asks Alan Rossi. A very, very good question. Tomorrow we have David K. Johnson, the Pulitzer Prize winner. Later this week, Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night. It's going to be a really cool conversation. I don't need to tell you that we also have a couple of other major guests there. I'm spacing who's on the show. But anyway, tomorrow David will be here. Oh, I'm thinking John Rothman will be here on Wednesday, of course. Belinda on Thursday. We've got quite the week ahead. So Nikki's got a great show ahead. San Jose vendor attacks. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants a national divorce. I don't know what that means, but we'll find out. Suck wants you to pay. Tucker gets the tapes from January 6th. Cost-benefit results in the 4-day work week. There's a lot there.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
I wish you all a happy holiday. Thank you for being with us.
Bye-bye.
We will see you tomorrow. Thanks for being here, and bye-bye.